Hey everyone, we have some open seats here, so if you're still looking for some open chairs, if you want to come up, we have one right here, we have one over here. Oh, you just take this. Yeah, we have one right here. Yeah, just take it. And we have a few up in the front too. Max, those seats are taken? Oh, they're full. Okay, got it.
All right, thank you. All right, everyone, we're starting our next session. Okay, amazing. Let me squeeze in with you guys. Is it good? Okay, we're good to go? Okay, great. Okay, excellent. So, many people always ask, what does it look like to actually transition into a green job? So some of you may already be steeped in the sustainability space, but I saw some of you who put in your, Luma event attendee, information, and you said that you actually don't work in sustainability. You want to figure out how to transition in. So super excited to do this session to talk about career transitions with folks ranging lots of different types of backgrounds. Honestly, you all work in completely different types of industries, which is really cool. And they're going to give you some advice. So we're going to get started. I would love for each of you to introduce yourselves and tell us what is your green career and talk a little bit about how you got there. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Lydia, Avila, she, her pronouns. I'm a native Angelino. So I would say that I started in the climate movement. That's my political home. I'm more on the political and policy side. And I started about 16 years ago. My first job straight out of college was I was a community organizer for the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign, fighting proposed coal plants in Texas. And I took this job in the wake of the 2008 economic crash. And that is all to say that I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I just needed a job, something that paid the bills. And I didn't want to move in back with my parents. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to Texas. So went to Texas, not knowing anybody, took this job. And that started me off into what I'm doing now, which is I'm in philanthropy. So I do grant making to nonprofits that are working on climate change policy at the community and state level. And all of my grant making is actually focused in Colorado. So I get to work remotely and go to Colorado a few times a year. But I work with community-based organizations that are organizing around multiple issues typically, but one of them being climate change, energy efficiency, and a host of other related issues. So I will leave it at that for now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jake Siegler. I lead marketing for Planet House. Planet House is a sustainable events company that I can share more about later. Backtrack about 10 years. I went to undergrad at UC Davis, thought I wanted to be a farmer, studied sustainable agriculture and food systems, quickly realized farming was not for me. I'm not good with my hands. I don't like getting dirty, and I have a terrible sense of direction, which is weirdly important if you're working on a farm. I pivoted, and I did some nonprofit work for a while, some outdoor education, and then I got my first job at an early stage startup. I didn't really know what that meant, but it turned out startups are a place where you can grow really quickly, you learn a lot because you have to, and you can up-level your career in a pretty short amount of time. I worked in the education space for a while, the food space for a while before pivoting into climate in 2020. I was riddled with climate anxiety and grief. I didn't know how to channel that energy. I have always had a hard time separating my heart from my work, and so discovered that climate tech is a real thing. Was really lucky to find a role in 2020 for a climate tech startup, and then for the last 6 years have been doing business development and marketing at a couple different climate tech startups.
Hey everyone, my name is Julian Malagon. I've spent the past 13 years building kids and family franchises at places like 20th, Netflix, Sony. And more recently, I've joined Hollywood Climate Summit as an advisory board member and worked with the TV Academy in their climate storytelling peer group and with folks like Climate Spring and Climate Power to really bring those stories to the forefront in entertainment and engagement. And that's, I think, for me, where the focus is now. It's maybe a little less traditional of a clear space in the green job space and more about how we can apply those same practices of creating engagement in storytelling to really engage community in action that is climate forward.
Incredible. And for folks who don't know what the Hollywood Climate Summit is, how would you define it?
Hollywood Climate Summit is all about bringing community together to share insights and practices and create narratives that are sitting at the intersection of entertainment and storytelling and climate consciousness, really, and greed forward mentality.
Incredible, incredible. Well, each of you obviously comes from completely different backgrounds. That's why I love this panel. But I would love to ask, what has your experience been with transitioning into a climate career? And what are the most important facts that drove your decision to get into this industry?
So like I mentioned, my first job in the climate field was straight out of college. But what I didn't talk about was what I did when I was in college. I was at UCLA for my undergrad career. And I started by before I even stepped in the classroom, I went to a activities fair, and I signed up to volunteer for an organization that's called Latinas Guiding Latinas, and it's a mentoring program for Latinas in East LA. And so, the mentors are the girls in undergrad, right, and the mentees are the girls in 4th through 12th grade. So we went to a couple high schools, middle school, elementary school once a week, and did mentoring with the objective of getting them prepared and excited about going to college. And I did that because of my background. I'm from a predominantly Latino, low-income community, and I felt like there wasn't enough representation, like people like me in college. So I wanted to give back, and that's what I chose to do. Well, the reason that this is relevant is because I come to find out 4 years later when I'm interviewing for the job at the Sierra Club that is what they're most interested in. They don't care that I'm an environmental studies major. All they want to hear about is what I did when I was volunteering with Latinas Guiding Latinas. And they were like, oh, so you did workshops. Tell us about that. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I did workshops for the parents about financial aid and what it meant for their girls to go to college and blah, blah, blah. And they were like, great. And you manage volunteers. I was like, oh, yeah, we had 40 volunteers. And I signed them up for shifts for our fundraising. And I ended up being the executive director of our little student-run group. I mean, this was obviously just student-run, student initiative. And that is what got me into this job. And the reason I wanted to do this job or work for the Sierra Club was just because I wanted to do something about climate change. But I had no idea what. I was just like, this matters a lot. And it feels like if we don't get this right, nothing else matters. So I want to put my degree to use. I don't know what I'm doing. And I applied for a very vague fellowship program with the Sierra Club just to get my foot in the door. And lo and behold, all the volunteer work that I had been doing for 4 years is really what got me the job, because I had gotten all these skills that I didn't realize were that important, such as being able to talk to a group of people without getting nervous, trying to relay complex topics in a digestible way. I tell people, you'd be surprised how important it is to just be able to have a conversation on the phone with someone you don't know and have it be a meaningful transaction in terms of the conversation. Such basic things is essentially what got me in the door. That's the question, right?
Yeah, that was amazing.
Okay.
Yeah, that was awesome. I resonate a lot with your story. Similar for me, I was working for these early stage tech startups, feeling like I kind of hated my life. And one part of me was like, I want to go back to the farm because the grass is greener. The other part of me is like, I'm going to blow it all up, go back to school, become a therapist, which is another thing that was on my plan for a while. And then just home for the summer during the pandemic, started reaching out to people I knew, people I didn't know, asking questions, trying to find what was next for me, and realizing that a lot of the skills I had been developing were actually really transferable into the climate space. And that was not on my bingo card. It was the product of reaching out, asking dumb questions, trying to follow leads where they came. If someone was like, oh, I know this person, would you want to talk to them? Saying yes and seeing how that conversation went. And a lot of times it was kind of a waste of 30 minutes. And sometimes it was an amazing opportunity that opened up a new door. And so I think for me, it was this combo of having a plan that I wanted to follow because it was my guiding North Star of sorts, and also being really open to when that plan didn't work and when other doors were opened that I didn't think would open, and when things I thought would be there for me weren't. And so I think just really staying kind of Heart-centered is a phrase I use. I think it's like, what is your internal compass? And letting that be fluid and flexible to a point, so that whether it's going back to school, going back to the farm, realizing that like your skills of picking up the phone and cold calling someone actually lend themselves to the field you want to be in. Maybe it's the same role, but it looks really different because the company you work for matters a lot. The people you work for matter a lot. And so sometimes the same role at a different place in a different moment can hit really different.
That's so well said, man. I think for me, it was less of a, or at least felt less like a transition and more like a realization. And I think, your last panel was actually hitting on this a little bit, too. I guess if I'm going far back enough, I'm from Miami. I remember watching kids' content really early on that most resonated with me when it was mindful of this earth that we've inherited. And frankly, there's not a lot of that content even to this day, and there certainly wasn't back then. I'm not going to age myself, but there wasn't a lot of it then. And growing in Miami, it was something that was all around us. The climate being impacted in a really tangible and palpable way, while contrasting against, frankly, the masses that really didn't pay it much mind in that community. And it drove me to start and lead the Earth Club in high school. So that was probably my first chapter in it. But yeah, I think for me it was a lot about understanding that a lot of the practices that we use to shape culture through narratives, through entertainment, are the same practices and systems that we can use to shape climate engagement. And I think for me, my North Star has been taking, I guess, a step back, or 30,000 foot view, whatever you want to call it, to understand how those skills apply more holistically, and how that perspective is really going to guide you to find those opportunities to create that impact, even with skills that you perhaps thought weren't as transferable.
Yeah, I think that's great. I really want to get more into that translation piece, because I think that's at the core of how do you transition into this industry, right? If you have an existing skill set, how can you actually, translate that and make that applicable for climate work? So I just want to know if you guys have either examples in your own work. I think Julian, especially, I think this might apply to you for this question. How were you able to translate those skill sets? Like, was it a requirement of you needing to get additional education about a subject? Or was it intuitive? Like, what was the process of, adding green to your resume?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of applied learning and seeking out those opportunities that help bridge the gap between a lot of my previous work and content development and production, and how to really engage in a climate forward lens today. And I think of it more as almost like a hybrid, where it's a little bit of both right now, but really entering those spaces, seeking out those folks who are like-minded, who are coming from similar backgrounds, who have already done it. They're out there, right? And that's not specific to entertainment and storytelling. That's in any trade. Find the folks who resonate with your skill set, with your experience, with your work background and your passions, who are perhaps, maybe a generation older, or who are already creating those spaces, and lean in. See if you could add to that momentum, build upon it with something that you bring as add value that maybe they don't already have. I think that's something I've been really fortunate to find almost organically with Hollywood Climate Summit, is folks who I consider now family, who I can resonate with, who I want to spend time with, to collectively have that impact in storytelling and leveraging our collective resources, right? Whether it's, in my space, studios and networks and creative talent, executive producers, suits of any kind, and how to really capture them and leverage how you're perceived as an expert in certain respects, to really help them take what they're doing and turn it into really tangible action, or at least really compelling stories that lead to that action. And I think that's a space that I'm really curious about right now, is how do we take engaging, compelling storytelling and turn it into tangible climate action right now?
That's great. Do either of you want to add on to that? Translation of skill sets?
I would just add that, kind of going off of what you were saying is, I tell people, tell everyone what you want. Like, anybody that you meet in situations like this, you should be like, over-explaining, telling people this is what my goals are, this is what I want, because you'd be surprised how many people will immediately start thinking like, who do I know? How can I help you? Like, because if you're especially at a place like this, but most folks that are like second or third stage of their career, I think, like, at least in my experience, are very open to like helping younger people and newbies in the field, whatever they're at, to get their foot in. And I think just even telling people what you're looking for, what your dreams are, what your ultimate goal is actually really, really important. Not just like listening, but obviously listening is really important, but also sharing as much as possible. And then also, Julian was talking about like when you meet people that are in your field or where you want to go, offering your time and is there any way I can help with that? Because showing up to things and just meeting people is like 90% of how you get in. And I'm sure you've heard this already today, but it's true.
Yeah, I feel like you guys covered it all, really. It's people. Like, it's never been easier to write the resume. Education matters, but I think it's really the people that are the bridge for translation. I think it's finding the right people who can give you that bridge to walk on to get into the new space, whether that's green or something else. And I think also recognizing that this work is filled with cycles. Like, I wish it was consistent and in a positive trajectory always. It needs to be, we deserve it to be, but it sadly isn't. And so it will continue to wax and wane. And so I think like recognizing that right now we're all on one side of the coin, theoretically, of like, I'm looking for a job or I have a job to give, but it all comes around and we'll all be in each other's shoes many times through our careers. And so showing up is a way to help where you can so that one day you can ask for help, and then that just continues over and over, and we build a network of people who want to help each other.
Yeah, of course.
So one thing I would add, you just reminded me, is once you identify like the position you want or the title or wherever you want to work, I would really recommend starting to look at every individual skill that falls under that job description and starting to skill gather. I would call it gathering more than building, because you are literally like intentionally gathering those skills so that your resume reflects exactly what they're looking for. So a super quick example is I set my eyes on wanting to be an executive director for a nonprofit. And so I literally like looked at job descriptions of like job postings of what an executive director at an organization like the one I wanted to work at did. And then I was like, okay, I don't know how to do that. I don't have the skills in that. So then I started tackling them one by one. And like when I was in grad school, I took extra finance and budgeting classes, even though I hated them. Because you're an executive director, you got to manage budgets, right? And you need to be able to read spreadsheets, and it's complex. So I forced myself to take like extra classes in that area so that I was comfortable and be able to confidently say, yes, I'm very comfortable with budgeting and forecasting and all these things. So, small example, but you get my drift.
That's great. Oh, do you want to add something?
If you don't mind,
else?
yeah, because I'm inspired by y'all. I think in addition to that, a lot of times you already have those skills, right? And I think it's important that we remind ourselves of that. Not always, right? I think there's definitely opportunities to continue learning and building, but think about the translation of those skills into the spaces that you want to be in. Think about the work that you've done and how you can convert that to match that job description that you're going for. Because I think the people who stand out, particularly in a crowded market, are the ones who can demonstrate and stand out through their practice and experience and really show intention and an ability to be adaptable and versatile.
It's fantastic. And, according to you all, what do you find as the 3 most important fields that you are seeing emerging in the climate market in the next couple of years? And how do you think folks could maybe consider getting into them?
Okay. So I'm going to probably have a super different answer from these folks because I'm in the policy and political side. And one thing I wanted to also point out real quick is like, if you're like I was, where I was like, I just want to do something about climate change and you don't really sure what it is. All of these organizations and companies, typically they all have HR people, they have ops people, they have admin people, like, so you can, and finance people, you can contribute to the cause in the niche that you like. Like, not everybody has to be a researcher, not everybody has to gather data and like, you don't have to be a climate expert to contribute to the climate movement, right? So I just wanted to like point that out, because we've had people join at the organization that I'm from that like are inspired. They went from like doing a finance job that has nothing to do with nonprofits and climate or policy to working with us simply because they're like, I believe in the mission and I want to help, but my skill set is in, finance or whatever it is, right? Anyway, so putting a pin in that. Not sure how much it's been talked about, but it's all the buzz in my field is AI, data centers, water, and energy efficiency. Like, those are the big three. We are not going to successfully transition into a fossil fuel-free energy world unless we also can tackle energy efficiency and water efficiency in a really smart way. So that's where I'm seeing a lot of buzz, and that includes like the rise of AI and data centers, because they're obviously very water and energy demanding. And this is I can't tell you how many data center events I have been invited to in the last 6 weeks. Like, it is so hot in the policy and energy spaces. So if that's something you're interested in, jump on that train, because this is where it's starting. We're at the first part of the train, and I'm sure it's going to be a hot topic for like at least another 10 years, if not, who knows, foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think to your first part about like many jobs can be a climate job, I think that can sometimes feel like a trope, but I think it is often true. If you work at an organization and there isn't a dedicated green, sustainability, climate role, that probably is an opportunity. And I've seen so many people translate and transition from like, I spun up this pseudo sustainability role at my organization to I now have a fully dedicated sustainability role, or figure out how to tell a story that weaves that into the role that you're applying for. There's like so many ways to weave sustainability, green, climate work into our current roles. I think that's piece one. I think energy is one of the fields that just continues to evolve and open a lot of opportunities. It takes many shapes when we're in boom or bust in relation to fossil fuels, unfortunately, but whether it's water, whether it's data centers, I think energy is one of those fields. I also think the third, maybe more relevant to Julian and I's work, but comms and content and marketing around sustainability, including in-person events. I think post-pandemic, we are all so hungry to be here in person. I think we have this huge gap when it comes to how we talk about the climate crisis. It's like one of the biggest problems that we're facing, and I think normal people in the mainstream, consumers around the world, don't really relate to how many of us in this space talk about climate. There's an access gap, there's an education gap, there's a general translation gap, and finding ways online and in person to talk about this work in a way that creates more fluency. That's something that I spend a lot of time focusing on in my work, especially around consumers who, and now I'm tangenting, but most of us want to support and purchase sustainable products, but we have this incredible lack of trust, and we generally just don't really understand the communication we receive from brands and the products they sell. And so on both sides, whether it's working for a company that makes things or an organization that enacts policy, or on your own trying to build a brand around sustainability, I think there's a lot in kind of the general umbrella of communication.
And can you plug Planet House? What is that all about? What do you do?
Planet House tries to do this. So we start with the home, and our goal is to showcase what sustainable living actually looks and feels and tastes and smells like. So we stage these rooms of a house, kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, garden, with all of these brands who are showcasing a more sustainable product than the market typically provides. And guests can walk through. It's one part like a living museum where you can learn about the work that kind of underlies these products at the supply chain level, the farm level, the ingredient level, and then you get to meet the people behind those products. You get to hear conversations like this. You get to take some goodies home with you. And the goal is recognizing that most consumers want to shop sustainably, but there's an intention to action gap. The goal is that events like Planet House help kind of move us along in a positive way towards a more sustainable consumer industry.
I love it. I love it. And one last quick thing, in addition to everything you already shared, what was the one best piece of career advice you have been given that you can share along your green career journey, if you have one?
I think for me, it's that I don't have to do it all or know it all or be the one-stop shop. I think finding that power in that collective power and building community to see something through and not being the most informed, experienced, whatever, smart, accomplished person in the room is something that has truly benefited me and my objectives in having that impact. And I think actually perfect segue to your last question is one of those places I see a lot of opportunity for impact and growth is in storytelling, right? Well, obviously biased because that's the space I'm in. But I can give you a couple of examples. I've had the privilege and opportunity to work on shows like The Octonauts, Creature Cases, and Reading Rainbow. All kid shows, so if you have kids, maybe you know them. If you know those shows, you know that a lot of the subject matter ties directly to the world we have inherited, the environment that we live in, nurturing care, how to instill practices in young ones that really help protect this planet and the animals and our water sources and how to really nurture them and grow. And it's not didactic. I'd like to think. It's very much a term that we use called hiding the broccoli, and getting those messages across in a way that feels organic but intentional and still entertaining, right? In doing that, I would never have been able to see those through effectively if I thought I had all the tools and knowledge to see it through. I have to leverage consultants who are experts. I have to collaborate with scientists who focus on these spaces to help empower these stories in a really tangible way, so that kids and families walk away with knowledge and experience and understanding that, like, oh wait, I can have a role in this too. And I think that's really important too. And at risk of sounding like a broken record, you don't have to find a job with climate in the title. You have to find ways to layer that work into what you're already doing. And I think it's a two-way street, back to what we were talking about before, of like, how can I apply my skills to help that objective be realized? I think that's something that's really important to me. And I'm sure to all of you, that's why you're here, right? You're building community. You're finding ways you can collaborate and bring your skill set and experience and perspective to a common good and a collective effort. And I think ultimately that's what it's all about. It's widening that funnel, because if we're all just working in stuff that's specifically geared with climate titles and for people working specifically in climate concentrated roles, we're not really broadening that access. We're not creating further engagement, and that's going to be necessary for us to accomplish what we're doing here. And kind of going back to what you all were saying too, I think in tech and infrastructure, I think there's a huge growing opportunity for the climate to have a significant footprint in those spaces now more than ever. So that's a really clear opportunity for folks who have skills from other work backgrounds to be able to transfer them, I think, now more than ever.
Also, not to date myself, but I'd like to lobby you to bring back Magic School Bus, but we can talk about that later. So mine would be showing up in person, showing your face, meeting everyone in the room. I look around and like most of y'all are going to be in the workforce for several decades. And so think about this in the long run. Like, this is a long-term plan, long-term game you're playing. I was recently at a consortium in downtown LA, like literally like a month ago, and I ran into people that I hadn't seen in like 10 or 12 years from like past jobs and past iterations of my career. And I sat down and talked to all of them, and most of them remembered me, some of them didn't, but I reminded them who I was. And it's like, I'm not looking for a job. I'm happy where I'm at right now, but I still did that because those connections, you don't know when they're going to serve you, and vice versa. You don't know when somebody is going to come to you and ask for support that you're going to be excited to give. So I know it can be really frustrating in the immediate term if you're really urgently looking for a job, something that pays the bills. But again, y'all are relatively young. And so think about this in like 10, 20 years, you're going to be looking back at like, oh yeah, maybe it'll be me. Like you met me 10 years ago, right, at a jobs fair. And also, by the way, just a quick plug, like I'm going to stick around for a little while afterwards if anybody wants to talk about what I do more specifically, because I realized I kept saying like policy and politics, but I'm like, I don't know if people really understand what that means. So I'm happy to go into like the weeds about what my job actually looks like and the kinds of organizations that we work with. But yeah, that'll be for afterwards.
I was working for a plant nursery, and I had this boss who was like 6'8", and he had this huge beard, and he was like a plant expert, but he was like, he played football his whole life, just full of multitudes, and he had to get his right leg amputated, which is really hard if you have to be on your feet for work. And he showed up like a week after the surgery, which was way too short, wearing a kilt, and he just like wore the kilt every day for like the next few years. Just a crazy dude. But he told me he ended up passing away, and we had a celebration of life for him while he was still alive. And he told me, the last thing he said, he was like, whatever you do, wherever you go, be the kindness that breaks through. And I think that that has so much power in our world of work, and it has so much intangible value to just like who we are and what can be available to us. So
Oh, it's a beautiful note to end on. Let's give them all a round of applause. And if you want to learn more about all their work, they have all of their LinkedIns and info in the agenda, so make sure you check that out. And they will be sticking around for a little bit. And Jake is actually one of our career coaches. So if you want to get to know him more and do some coaching with him, he'll be here all day. So yeah, thank you guys. And we're going to be shifting into our ecology job session. So stick around for a few minutes. Thank you guys. And then we're going to get a picture all together.